Damas un kungi, dear ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce our special guest, Mrs. Jolanta Reingarde, as a representative of European Gender Equality Institute. And I want to tell at the beginning that in the view of modern policy analysis, the welfare of families with children and also some improvements in the demographic situation are strongly correlated with the gender equality dimension. And in terms of gender equality policy and gender mainstreaming instruments, such significant goals are formulated as prevention of labor market segregation, female employment, reconciliation of family and working life, as also, for example, anti-violence programs, health and care policy. Achievement of all mentioned goals not only improve the gender aspects in everyone policy, but it also increase well-being of families with children. Therefore, we have specially invited our guest, and I will give the word to Mrs. Reingard.
Good afternoon. First, allow me to express our big appreciation to the organizers of the conference, to the University of Latvia and Ministry for inviting us and providing a floor here to talk to you. And I think the conference that you have and the topics and discussions that you are having during those 2 days, I think they are extremely important. Myself, I am originally from your neighboring country, from Lietuva, and I was thinking yesterday that I wish we had more intensive discussions on those issues that you are covering during those 2 days, because we saw a lot during those 2 days how serious the situation is in several areas, and unless we take certain actions and strong positions on them, we might face very serious consequences. Allow me first to start my presentation by very shortly introducing what is this institute and what is it doing. It's the institute, it's called European Institute for Gender Equality. It's a European agency. It's based in Vilnius, started its activities in 2010, so it's a relatively new institution. Why it was established, why it is needed? European agencies, they are providing expertise on specific questions to Commission, Parliament, Member States, governments. These are the primary stakeholders of the Institute. So we are operating at European Union level. It means that we are working not for Lithuanian government, but we are working for all countries of European Union. We are relatively small. We have 30 permanent staff representing our people coming from all over Europe. And we are working a lot I would say, in the 4 major areas. One area is related with the research, data, statistics, indicators. We have a relatively small team, but this is very important. We know that data is the strong policy tool. Without data and evidence, we can hardly expect any political decisions. Another big area of Institute's work is gender mainstreaming, to provide good practices on how to mainstream gender into policy making. And we are working on a few gender mainstreaming tools, and I will show you later on my slides. Another big area is to collect, coordinate, and centralize different resources on gender equality, which at the moment are scattered all over Europe. And if you want to find a good different policy proposals, policy documents in different languages in different member states, of course you might find it difficult. So Institute established a resource and documentation center. It's a central point in Europe on gender equality, through which you can access, make an easy search, and find the relevant materials. Yes, and another important area is so-called networking, how to make bridges between academics, policymakers, civil society organizations. The conference that you are having during those 2 days is a perfect example of a bridge between academic community and policymakers. I think it's mutually beneficial because policymakers, of course, are looking at you, at researchers and academics for good research and evidence, which could push forward, ideally, a policy-making process. Maybe it does not happen always like this, but of course we would expect it to be like this. Now, I will try to combine in my presentation a bit of results of Institute's work, but at the same time I will also present you what we are doing and what are the opportunities. I was listening yesterday and today, all these very good presentations. With the help of my colleagues from the ministry, they were helping me with translations. And I was thinking that you came across an issue of gender, and probably I don't need to convince you. It would probably be very difficult to approach these issues without taking into account gender aspects. I can take you several examples. One of my former very good colleague, Domantas, yesterday was presenting statistics on suicide in Lietuva. And how can you explain the fact that men are committing suicides 10 times more than women? Is it accidental, or is it something very systematic, which we have to explain, taking a certain gendered aspects into account? What's wrong in the way of living? What are those factors that push men 10 times more to commit suicide than women? When I think about life expectancy, which in Baltic countries, the gap between women and men is the highest in Europe. In my country, I think it's 10 to 11, 12 years. What is that? Besides certain biological factors, the social aspects are extremely important. Why it is men who are dying more often at a younger age from the reasons which could be avoided? And we can extend this list further, and I think it's very important to take these aspects into account. Fertility rate. I heard arguments saying that, yes, the traditional family model could be very favorable to fertility rates. For example, in Italy, where women's employment rate is just a little bit above 50, and so many women sit at home. Why they don't give birth to children? Because they're sitting at home. Why not? But they don't. They don't. Why we have then Scandinavian and Nordic countries where women's employment rate is above 70 and fertility rates are relatively high? Very many people would say that, oh, these Scandinavian women are very emancipated, and emancipation probably shouldn't be a favorable factor to fertility rates, but the reality is different. Women are working, women are economically independent, and women give birth to children. I don't think that women don't want to give birth to children. All over the world, they do that. They would like to do that, and they will do that. And in the favorable economic circumstances, they could do it even more. If we provide the favorable opportunities, meaning services, opportunities to reconcile work and family life, and of course support from their partners. Last year, in June, Institute launched a Gender Equality Index. I would like to show a few results to you. And I will connect to the demographic processes that we are discussing during those days. Why it was important? First of all, Gender Equality Index is needed as a monitoring tool to monitor the effectiveness of policies, where we are and what is the situation in a different domains of social life, which shows very clearly outcome of policy. It's not enough to make big investments in certain fields. But if the reality for women and men is different, and women or men are disadvantaged in certain areas, we say that investment is not probably effective as it could be. We have to take different actions and to think about something else. So index, think of it as a monitoring tool which shows to us the reality, which shows to us where the gender gaps, the distance between women and men is the biggest. And I want to tell you from the beginning, please don't think that gender equality index includes only the areas where women are at a disadvantage. It's a wrong assumption, because in the social reality, we have a number of areas where men are at a disadvantage. And we think of it also as an issue of gender inequality. So it's not only women's issue, it's equally men's issue as well. First of all, how we defined it. There are big discussions about, so what do you want from gender equality? Do you want women and men to be the same? We are biologically different, you want to equalize it? No. We want the outcomes of policies. We want opportunities for women and men. We want that they enjoy opportunities in the same way, both women and men. So gender equality is equal share of assets. Assets would be equal opportunities to take part in economic and social life, equal parity when it comes to decision making, but also equal dignity and integrity, equality to live healthy lives, equality to be free from violence. That none of us in the society, doesn't matter which gender you are not abused by the other gender because you are woman or man. So this is very important aspects of equality. It's not to equalize. It's simply to enjoy equal opportunities in this life and to enjoy, if policies and investments are done, to enjoy equal outcomes of that. That money which are invested in certain areas, that women and men could enjoy the equal outcomes, both women and men in certain policy areas. What index is measuring? Index is measuring gaps. How far women and men are from each other. But the gaps are also adjusted to the level of achievement. I will give you a very simple example. In times of economic crisis, we know that very many men in different countries, probably in all countries of European Union, experience big disadvantages in economic life. Men's employment rate in very many countries drastically decreased because of men's predominant share in this industry and construction business. So the gaps closed down, but not because women's situation became better. No, because men's situation became worse. So we have gaps in certain countries which are zero, but the level of achievement is low. I can give an example of Bulgaria, where gap of employment stays almost at a zero level, but the situation is bad for both. So this is not what we are aiming at. We're aiming at gaps which are small and high levels of achievement, meaning that both women and men are involved in employment at as high as possible rates. So we had to adjust to the level of achievement and not to equalize countries like Sweden with Bulgaria, which are very, very different, with gaps at a zero level, but levels of achievement very different. Gender Equality Index takes into account EU context. I want to stress this fact because there are many global indices which take into account very aspects which are not actually that relevant to European context. Here we took a look to what are our priorities, what are our problems at EU level, what are the policies and what are the priorities, because this is a tool for European Union countries. The formula is very difficult. I'm not going to explain it. This is the formula of index. Some of my colleagues is joking, saying, this is the way to gender equality. But the interpretation of index is simple. It's from 1 to 100, where 1 stands as an absolute inequality, 100 is absolute equality. Whatever score you will see, I suggest you interpret it like this. The closer to 100 it is, the better it is. If the closer to 1 it is, it's a worse situation. So this is the scale of interpretation. Now, here we have this nice picture of the domains which were included in the index. I will show you very quickly what's actually inside them. It's health, money, work, time, knowledge, and power. This is the core. This is the core areas which were calculated in the index. And then we have 2 satellites, which is violence and intersecting inequalities. I will not focus on these today because they are problems of different nature, and because they are interpreted differently, they cannot be mixed and included in the core. What we have in the domain of work, what is important, you see the variables, not exact titles, but I propose that you look at the right side. Full-time employment equivalent, duration of working life, sectorial segregation, flexibility of working time, health and safety training at work. These issues are extremely relevant, especially the issue when we talk about, of course, participation in the labor market is a prerequisite for economic independence. So one of the major factors which influences the family decisions to have children, but it's also flexibility of working time. When we look at the countries like, of course, probably Scandinavian countries, which immediately come to my mind with their different policies and organizations development, very flexible working time arrangements, that young families, young parents with the small children can actually adjust their working time according to the needs of families, okay? That women or men could work a certain amount of time, and then she goes home, and then her husband goes to work, and they share this working time, and all these opportunities, which actually is a very good opportunities to ease a life of families and to help them to, to deal to work and family commitments. So these are the main aspects which were included under the area of work. And here we have the main conclusions of this would be that women remain less likely to participate in the labor market. It's not that women don't want to participate, but all over Europe, if we take a look at the data, we'll see that participation rate of women is lower. This is the data taken from Eurostat, so it's comparable and harmonized data. Large gender segregation in the labor market remains prevalent. Recently, we found a very interesting findings when we work on part-time work, that sectors where women are, where there are more women than men, are actually more favorable to part-time arrangements. And the sectors where men work, like transport and industry, they're less favorable for part-time arrangements. This means that for men, to change from full-time to part-time, most likely they will have to change a sector. Because in the sector that they work, it's very difficult. So it's actually the issues of segregation in the labor market are also very important and relevant to be addressed. And the gendered nature of quality of work needs to be measured. What are those institutional arrangements which... Okay, so here we have an index for Europe and Latvia. Let me spot quickly where Latvia is. You are here on this left side. It doesn't actually matter that much, even if you will not see, there are a few still publications on the table. So according to these variables that were calculated in the index, this is the so-called ranking of countries, but in the domain of work. Okay, so EU average stands close to 70, meaning that there is still quite a long way to the equality measure. Now, in the domain of money, what we took into account? We took into account earnings and income. Income is very relevant because, for example, here we took into account pension gaps. Pensions that women and men receive, and here we have also a big difference. So, of course, the fact that women at a certain time in their life, they drop from the labor market, And then, of course, some of them have difficulties to come back and integrate. And the fact that they are earning less, it's a pay gap. Of course, it translates into so-called lifelong dependence on their partners, lifelong dependence on the state. And the pensions, we also have a very good evidence showing that the pension gaps are big. And of course, women live longer. It means that they have to actually deal with this material deprivation in their life longer. And then we have economic situation, a few variables for economic situation. So let me make now conclusions. So it's not, unfortunately, probably don't see very well. Women receive lower earnings and income than men in the EU. It's in absolutely all countries. This is the tendency. And women are at a disadvantage in terms of their economic situation. You talked today, I think there was this fact mentioned that there are very many households where so-called single-parent households, that children are staying just with the women and men. Is the same in my country, and those single-parent households, mostly with women, are at the highest risk of poverty. And this is, I think, a very important actually finding and fact to be taken into account. And in the domain of money, it's again, the index for Europe is 69. It means that there is still a big room until we reach 100. Luxembourg is an outlier here. I don't want now to go into this, but it's a bit stays. There is this different situation in Luxembourg. Now, the domain of knowledge it basically deals with issues of education. And what interesting findings we have here, you know that overall in Europe, 60% of graduates from universities are women. It means that here we are dealing with a reverse situation where men in education system are more disadvantaged than women. You know that we have much more, the number of boys dropouts from school is much higher than among girls. Girls are performing better at school. Girls have a higher qualification. But then, of course, it's interesting, but it does not translate into any advantages in labor market. And this is, of course, we can ask, let's wait and we'll see how it will be in the future. Will the fact that there are more competent women with higher qualifications, will translate in any benefit? So this is an interesting, actually, finding. And then we also included lifelong learning. This is a new trend in Europe. This is, of course, involves this education throughout the life, access to information technologies, learning languages in order to be able to adjust to the new requirements of the labor market. Situation in the, I mentioned the main findings in the education of knowledge, and actually that women outnumber men. This is important finding. But another thing is that gender segregation, because I talked about segregation in the labor market. Of course, first of all, it starts from education. Education is very segregated. And we now notice very interesting trends. There are more and more girls who go for so-called STEM sciences, science, technology, engineering, and math. There are more and more girls every year, if you see the trend in Europe, who cross those barriers and choose those sciences. But if you ask me, are there more boys who go for health, education, and social work? Unfortunately, I cannot confirm the same. It means that these changes this year, they are not the same. And we are still actually lacking men or boys in this area. And then, of course, we hear people saying that, unfortunately, our boys, they receive very feminine, so-called socialization. First, they are with mothers, and then starting from kindergarten, they are mostly with women. Where are male role models? Boys are not actually, they do not have opportunities to experience this kind of male role models in education system, because there are, especially in primary schools and basic secondary schools, there are just a few men, and the majority are women. So this is the situation that we are facing. This course in the area of knowledge, much lower than the area of education, and I can tell you what is driving index down. It's segregation. The biggest inequality in the area of education are in segregation, how boys and girls choose professions. This is the major factor which is driving index down. And now, the area of time, this is the factor which is the most related with the topic probably of our today's and yesterday's discussion. The time that we spend for work, for caring, and for leisure. And this old actually saying that women are working 2 shifts, it's actually, unfortunately, it remains true. Because there are time use surveys where we can clearly see how much time women and men spend on caring, on household works, and here are the variables that we included. I tell you, probably the conclusions will not be something new for you because women remain disproportionately responsible for caring activities. I would like to mention there was the example of Iceland mentioned today. We probably have to add a few more countries. State policies which introduced the paternity leave legislation, which gives a right, non-transferable rights to men, take a paternity leave and stay with children. There is ample evidence showing what were the outcomes of such a political decision. Because in Iceland, from what I heard from different researchers, fertility rate increased, violence against women decreased, divorce decreased, means relationship in family improved because men became closer to this huge area which is called caring. It's not just this earning money, running without head and thinking how to earn money, but coming closer to this reality, which is so important for children, for women, for family, and for societies. So in the area of time, don't be surprised, the score is very low. Because in very many countries, and in our countries, I tell you that there was this question about how much time you spend for child care and household care. I think the differences are 4 to 5 times bigger, meaning more women involved in these activities. So this is, I think it's very important when we think about fertility rates, about giving birth to children. Do women have enough support at home? Is there a partner who's helping with these activities? I think it's a very, very relevant question. Now, domain of power, I'll go very quickly through this domain of power because maybe it's not, in the context of demographic policies, for me it's relevant, like who is making political decisions for us? I assume and I make a kind of conclusion that of course if there are no women and if we have little number of women in decision making, who will represent a women's interests? So of course it's very, very relevant. In the power, we have the biggest differences all over Europe, is the lowest score, and the countries which introduced a certain measures of like quota regulation, they have higher numbers. But at this side, like when I think about countries like Cyprus, Italy, or Malta, it's probably you can count women in parliaments on your 2 hands. Very, very low number of women represented in decision-making power, meaning parliaments, governments, and regional assemblies or local councils. Okay, now health. Here again, I mentioned in the very beginning, we have big differences in life expectancy. It's at the disadvantage of men. Men are living shorter lives. Mortality, morbidity of men is higher. It's a gender issue. For us, it's clearly, it has to be, we have to think about how to improve this quality of life and how to tackle this issue of lifestyle as well, of women and men. And then access to services is very important. But in the domain of health, I would summarize is that the old adage that women get sicker and men die younger remains largely true, because even if women live longer lives, it does not mean that they live healthier lives. And this is important actually also to think about that. Our lives become kind of longer, but do we have a proper quality medical services assistance? What about our, again, lifestyles? Is it healthy life, healthy long life that we are living? But in the domain of health, we have the best gender equality scores. Yes, so here we have all domains, and now if we aggregate everything into one index, here's the index for Europe. This is the aggregation. Aggregate the score, it aggregates all domains. Europe stands halfway. It's a halfway towards equality. Your country, you can spot it quickly. It's here. I see it 3 steps. First of all, we have one step where the countries like Sweden, Denmark, Finland, and Netherlands. Then there is the second step, okay, where the countries are from UK to Estonia. Then started from Czech Republic, and to the end we have a third step. This is interesting analysis. We can, of course, also connect it to different welfare systems as well, because it confirms a different research and analysis which also compared to. And now, so here we have a big room for improvement. And now I would like to also show you just 2 slides about what further analysis we did with the index. What we tried to do, we correlated the index with so-called Barcelona targets. I don't know if you heard about it, the Barcelona targets on childcare provision, okay? It was in one of the meetings, the council decided that by 2010 in Europe, 33% of children under the age of 3 should be provided at childcare services. Okay, we are 2014, 4 years already ahead, but the target of 33% was not met in all these countries. It's only these countries here where the target, which are above the target. And what we see here, that the gender equality actually, it's very well correlates positively with this childcare provision. You can interpret it. I am not saying which impacts what. You can see that the better provision of services, the better scores of gender equality, or the better scores of gender equality, the more services we have. I am not now trying to see which determine what, but the important fact is that service provision is an important indicator. If there are no services, and if woman knows that after the birth of children, there will be nobody to help her, she will think twice, 3 times if to give a birth to a child or not. If in her living area, in her neighborhood, there is no good quality services, and it's a problem, okay? So with the children under 3, we see there is a big bulk of countries here which are behind the target. Now, I think it's 2010. Okay. Yeah. This is taken from EU Silk, because the index data is also 2010, so we correlated the same data of the same year. And then the Barcelona target for children above 3 until the compulsory school age. So here the situation is better, and the target is 90%. 90% of children above 3, from 3 to mandatory school age, should be provided services. So here we have countries which are also above the target, and here we have countries which are below. So it's actually the point what I wanted to see. It's probably, I agree, there might be that some improvements can happen in countries, because I think it's quite high on political agenda to solve an issue of services, but I just wanted to demonstrate that it's actually it has an impact to gender equality scores, and it correlates very much with the gender equality. Okay, so, and now this is the index interface that you can find on internet. It's a very attractive tool that we can, you can access on internet and actually play with it a little bit, choosing your country, choosing variables. It shows you, it's actually if you get one of these materials, publications that I put on the table, you will get. Is my time over, or still? Few minutes. Okay, and then I would like to just mention maybe another area, our work on gender mainstreaming and good practices. So you will ask, so what? Now you showed us the situation, and so what? Of course, the policymakers are looking at us and asking, so how we should deal with the situation? What are the good practices probably that we could maybe think about, we could address, and Institute actually works also in this area of so-called good practices. And in the area of gender mainstreaming, we decided to focus on competence development. One of the tools of gender mainstreaming is competence building. In very many countries, gender mainstreaming is not implemented. It's not because there is some low political commitment. But the problem is that people might lack certain knowledge about how to do it. For example, this famous concept of gender impact assessment or gender budgeting. Of course, it's something very new, and it's not that easy to understand, but of course it makes sense when you understand what is it. But the Institute decided to focus on this so-called capacity building, and we are collecting good practices on this training, different training initiatives and capacity building. And so what would be the main recommendations on how to strengthen the institutional capacity for gender mainstreaming? Of course, first of all, to strengthen legal obligations. There are countries in Europe where there are very clearly written in law, in a national legislation, that gender mainstreaming has to be implemented. So of course it has to be, first of all, become a part of legislation. Then it's very important to enhance the cooperation and networking. What countries which are more advanced in gender mainstreaming, they would say you can hardly achieve it if there is no cooperation between government, academics, and civil society. Civil society researchers, they have to become a permanent consultancy body, has to consult and always feed the policymakers with evidence. The government has to be open to opinions of civil society, keep them in so of course the level of openness to this, it's very important. We published a report recently on institutional mechanisms. What we found out, for example, I cannot remember exactly how it's the situation in your country, that civil society is involved, but more at ad hoc basis. There is no systematic and permanent kind of consultation process which would enhance this policy-making process. And of course, the use of gender mainstreaming tools, it's not obligatory, and this is a problem. It's kind of, there is no so-called hard legislative developments on EU level, because they cannot impose anything to member states. It's left to member states to decide what to do with gender mainstreaming. And of course, mostly we end up with very soft policy measures saying that we have to do it, but there are no actually mechanisms in place, there are no sanctions if you don't do that, and we end up with a bit of like things on paper, but not actually in reality. So the competence development program, so Institute has the whole competence development program. How to, and we collect good practices, we consult governments, and we think about how to improve this actually competence of different stakeholders in order to make these policies more gender sensitive, to make it a reality. We have a very useful database. If any of you are interested in the database of trainers or trainings or training materials, you can access it through Institute's webpage. You enter the topic that you are interested in, and you can make a very quick search. And this database, it involves all EU 28 member states. Imagine you decide to organize a training on a certain issue, you can always use it as a very useful resource to get some. There are many resources in English as well, manuals, guidelines, how to do certain things. Now, good practices. Below, you see the topics where for which we have collections of good practices. They are all accessible online. First, we started on prevention of gender-based violence. This was the Commission's request to us. How to prevent gender-based violence, to collect good practices. Okay, so we have a database on that. I mentioned database on gender training. Then gender equality in media. Female entrepreneurship, this is still what we are finishing, finalizing. It's not ready yet, but it's a very interesting topic. And work-life balance. For the work-life balance, it's still going on. But if you would be interested in some time to actually access our institute's webpage, it will be available. I would probably think that it's by the end of this year. What for this work-life balance, what we will focus on? We will focus on self-regulation in the organizations, enterprises. What are the measures of self-regulation that they apply in order to help the employees to reconcile work and family life? Just several examples, maybe some of them apply some flexible work arrangements, maybe there is some daycare center for children, maybe they promote some paternity leave for men and maybe even compensate partially for it. There are very many different examples of self-regulation. It means that it's not when the state imposes something, but organizations find it beneficial to apply this means and to empower their people in organization. Then awareness raising, including mentoring, and also training in organizations. So these will be the good practices that we will be working in. So they will give some real a bit of taste of what's happening in reality and how it would be possible to address those certain gaps that I mentioned before. So this is, thank you for your attention, and I would be more than glad to address you or to answer your questions if you have any.
I would offer to ask all questions. Maybe if Diana, you have question, maybe if short, for example, you can ask. But if the most of questions I offer to ask in terms of our roundtable discussion, which will occur. Yes. But if you have, okay.
And we have closely worked on these issues for the last years, and I'm hoping that when you will collect the next data, Latvia will succeed in some of those indexes, especially in childcare and some other as well. But what we have to be aware as well that even some very well-established rights of women, of reproductive rights of family and women are still negotiated here. And that has been last 2 years a new tendency. What we have been established here for decades with these rights of reproductive choices, now they're kind of discussed lately. So we have to be making sure that the reproductive rights won't really push the gender and the demographic issues further on. It's more like gender equality which we have to state on.
I want to just inform us that yesterday we had a very, very fruitful conversation with the people from the Ministry of Welfare, and we are launching an update of index in June 2015 during the Latvian presidency of the EU Council. And it will be a very good opportunity because the year that we will be looking at, this index is 2010, we will add 5 years backward, 2005, And we add 2 years forward, it's 2012. So we will have the time frame from 2005 to 2012, which is pre-crisis and this recovery period. And of course, the improvements will be taken into account, which are happening. But for Latvia, what I want to see, because we would like to do it in the context of Latvian presidency, it will be a good opportunity also to have a platform and to talk about the improvements. Because I agree with you that Baltic countries are really catching up fast, and we have our own reasons why we are. It's not that we are not willing, it's not that there is some kind of maybe, but I don't see a strong anti-gender equality movements in country, and we are catching up with these processes. It's just that, of course, there are certain reasons and certain obstacles which prevent the faster progress. Maybe we would like it to happen faster, but it is as it is. So this is just a bit of information on. Please.
Tulkot, es latviski jautāšu. Sakiet lūdzu, vai jūs uzskatiet, ka Latvijā un Lietuvā dzimuma līdztiesība ir nopietna problēma? Tā būtu pirmā jautājuma daļa. Un otrs jautājums ir, jūs pieminējāt tādus satraucošus lietas, ka vīriešu pašnāvības gadījumi, vīriešu dzīves ilgums ir īsāks kā sievietēm, vardarbība un citas problēmas, kuras tiešām ir lielas problēmas. Vai jūs esat iepazinusies ar statistiku, kura liecina, ka tādas problēmas kā vīriešu pašnāvības, dzīves ilgums, vardarbība būtu risināma citā ceļā, proti ģimenes institūcijas stiprināšana un laulības institūcijas stiprināšana, jo statistika parāda, ka vīrieši, kuri ir ģimenē, kuriem ir laimīga laulības dzīve, tur ir gan garāks šis vīriešu dzīves mūžs, tur ir mazāka vardarbība un līdz ar to arī daudz mazāk citu šo sociālo problēmu. Tad šis jautājums būtu tāds, vai lielāka vērība nebūtu jāvelta tieši ģimenes institūta stiprināšanai? Paldies!
We are often, in our different meetings, we often hear this concern that, especially in times of crisis, isn't this gender equality a bit of kind of luxury topic because we have many more relevant issues? But we say it's not contradicting. We shouldn't probably be thinking that it's actually gender equality an issue number one that we now suddenly start discussing. I have a few arguments here. First of all, I cannot say it so straightforward, is it yes or no? I think it's an issue of human rights. And we say it's whatever policy we develop, we simply have to be sensitive that our policies do not discriminate people, not just on the basis of gender, but on all other grounds. That we make a fair decisions to everybody. And like gender equality, I don't agree that it's a luxury. It's simply, we have to keep this in mind. We have to be sensitive. It's like we have very diverse populations. We have different age groups. We have people who are healthy and with disabilities. We have different ethnic groups. We have women and men. It's almost, yes, population is divided into two halves. And I think that it's not, we shouldn't be thinking about gender equality as a like, is it a problem number one, is it a problem number two? It's no, it should be integral part of different policies when we think about it, and it is as important as other grounds of our diversity. And of course, age should always be at the same level of our concern and our. Now, what regards the male suicide rates, it's Actually, I cannot provide any kind of more evidence of that. What are from what I know is that the most vulnerable men are from the age to 40, 49, living in regions of the country, meaning that they are economically disadvantaged, unemployed men who have also drinking problems, and these are the ones who are the most vulnerable to. If there are any other correlations with other aspects, for me it's very difficult to say. We probably have to look for them. But the fact itself that it's such a disproportion of women and men, it raises an interesting research question, which we simply cannot skip. It cannot skip our attention and attention of policymakers. So when you think about suicide prevention programs, how can you ignore this fact? Also about violence against men, how can you ignore the fact that the prisons are full of men and committing crimes, not just against violence against women, but among men as well, this violent behavior? Was it that? Is it something what we are born with, or is it something what we learn? I think it's just, so I do not have a kind of now statistics at hand to show you, but I think it's these facts, this distribution, very simple numbers, they're already telling, and we have to do something.
Tā, paldies. Mēs izsniedzam certifikātu arī mūsu viesim no Lietuvas, un es varbūt vērsīšu uzmanību tiem mūsu klātesošiem arī cienījamiem deputātiem, kas pievienojās mums pēc pusdienu pārtraukuma. Mēs tā kā bijām vienojušies, ka jautājumi un atbildes tiks sniegts apaļā galda diskusijas laikā. Tas ir 3:30, jo mēs vienkārši tehniski nespējam ielikties laikā, jo katra prezentācija, katra uzstāšanās ir ļoti interesanta, tādēļ šīs jautājuma atbilžu laiks tiek nobiedīts uz pēcpusdienu, kur jūs redzat darba kārtībā, ir apaļā galda diskusija, tieši 3:30 sākās, un lai mēs būtu laicīgi uz šo diskusiju, kad visi tie, kuriem ir jautājumi, vēl varētu ne tikai uzdot jautājumus, bet arī saņemt atbildes, es rosinu jau ar 15 minūšu nokavēšanos gan, bet doties pusdienas pārtraukumā un atgriezties šeit 1:30, lai turpinātu mūsu šodienas darbu. Paldies un tiekamies pēc pusstundas.